The town of Seward, Nebraska, nestled amidst vast fields and whispering winds, had long held a reputation for its quietude. On any given day, the streets of downtown Seward hummed softly with the life of a close-knit community. Shopkeepers exchanged morning greetings, children laughed on their way to school, and the elderly basked in the warmth of familiarity. Yet beneath this serene facade lay an undercurrent of tension that had slowly started to ripple through the town. It began with whispers, muted conversations in coffee shops, and murmurs at the local diner. Casey Kindt's name often surfaced in these hushed tones. A man with a shadowy past, his presence in Seward was both feared and pitied. Local business owners recalled how Kindt would frequent their establishments, not for camaraderie or commerce, but rather to inquire obsessively about Jamie Hagen's whereabouts. These interactions planted seeds of suspicion regarding his intentions, leaving a trail of unease among those who remembered him. As the narrative shifts to Casey's history, we find ourselves in the dimly lit corridors of the Seward Police Archives. Here, Detective Morgan sifted through stacks of aging police records, a task both tedious and revealing. The walls echoed faintly with resistance from colleagues who viewed Kindt's prior arrests as inconsequential due to the lack of convictions. There's nothing substantial, they argued, dismissing Morgan's concerns. But Morgan was meticulous. Page after page, he uncovered a tapestry woven with restraining orders and domestic disturbance calls, evidence that Casey Kindt's violent tendencies were not merely town gossip, but documented truths. Despite these findings, each case had been closed with a frustrating note of insufficient evidence, leaving a chilling gap between Kindt's actions and justice. This backdrop sets the stage for Jamie Hagen's desperate struggle for protection. The transition is seamless as we imagine her navigating the labyrinthine legal system in search of a safeguard against Kindt's escalating obsession. Her fear was palpable, a mix of dread and determination, knowing that every legal door she knocked on seemed to open only halfway. The tension mounts as Detective Morgan reflects on Jamie's plight. For her, every day was an exercise in vigilance. Every night, a test of endurance against the shadows that loomed just outside her door. She had fought hard to build a life free from Casey's grasp, yet it seemed his influence lingered like an unshakable specter. As Morgan pieced together this puzzle of fear and frustration, he found himself at a crossroads. The town's peace was fragile, a thin veneer overlying deep fractures caused by systemic failures to protect those most vulnerable. He knew that whatever actions he took next would be pivotal in preventing another tragedy. Then came the call that no officer wanted to receive, a chilling report of gunshots on North 2nd Street, Jamie Hagen's address. As Morgan raced towards the scene, heart pounding with urgency and dread, he couldn't shake the feeling that they had all underestimated Kindt's desperation. Upon arrival, chaos reigned where peace once dwelled. The flashing lights painted stark shadows against the homes lining the street, a community bound by fear and now by tragedy. In those final moments before stepping into the carnage left behind by Kindt's madness, Morgan understood this was just the beginning. The real questions were yet to be answered. How had they allowed it to come to this? And more importantly, what other secrets lay hidden in Seward's deceptively quiet streets? With these unresolved questions hanging in the frigid air like ghostly apparitions, we leave Detective Morgan at the threshold of an investigation that promised more darkness than clarity. Detective Morgan stood at the threshold of Jamie Hagen's home, the chaos of the crime scene still reverberating in his mind. The image of Jamie's lifeless body haunted him, but there was no time for hesitation. As he delved into her past, he found himself piecing together a narrative of resilience and fear. Jamie's ordeal began long before that fateful February night. She had spent countless hours within the beige walls of the county courthouse, determined to secure a protective order against Casey Kindt. Her presence there was driven by the urgent need to shield herself, but each attempt seemed thwarted by the intricate web of legal bureaucracy. In the courthouse hallways, Jamie often encountered a familiar pattern. While she presented her case with earnestness, Kindt countered with a calculated charm that seemed to sway opinions. During one pivotal hearing, a lenient judge, notorious for his susceptibility to flattering testimonies, listened intently as Kindt painted himself as misunderstood. Each favorable word was a knife twisting deeper into Jamie's resolve. Frustration mounted as Jamie left the courthouse yet again without the ironclad protection she desperately sought. Her heart heavy with despair, she realized that Kindt's manipulative behavior had managed to infiltrate even the halls of justice. It was this emotional burden that loomed over her like an unshakable shadow, propelling her inexorably towards Casey's ominous release on bond. Seeking solace and support, Jamie attended a community meeting at the local center. The room buzzed with chatter as residents gathered for what was supposed to be a beacon of hope for those facing domestic threats. But as Jamie voiced her plea for vigilance and support against Kindt's escalating obsession, skepticism clouded the room. Many attendees were unaware, or perhaps unwilling to acknowledge, the depths of Kindt's fixation on Jamie. A neighbor hesitantly recounted how Jamie had once confided in them about her doubts regarding legal protection's effectiveness. "She seems so alone," they admitted quietly, their words tinged with regret. This revelation painted a stark picture of isolation, one where Jamie's cries for help were lost amid the town's indifference. Her visible fear became an unsettling reminder of how unaware Seward was to the looming danger. As the meeting concluded, Jamie's fears became all too real, a warning sign that went unheeded by those around her. This lack of awareness within the community set the stage for February 8th's tragic escalation, leaving Detective Morgan grappling with what could have been done differently. The unanswered questions from Chapter 1 lingered heavily in Morgan's mind as he sifted through the wreckage of bureaucratic neglect and community oversight. How could Kindt have slipped through so many cracks? What unseen forces allowed him to walk free and unfettered? Just then, an unexpected call interrupted his thoughts. A tip from an anonymous source claiming new evidence had surfaced. The caller's voice was shaky yet insistent, hinting at documents that could expose discrepancies in how Kindt's previous charges were handled. With mounting urgency, Morgan realized this might be a breakthrough he desperately needed. Could these documents hold the key to understanding how Kindt evaded justice repeatedly? Were there more influential figures involved than initially suspected? As Morgan raced towards this new lead, his mind churned with possibilities, each more unsettling than the last. Yet one thought remained crystal clear. If they didn't act swiftly, Seward would continue to be haunted by its own failures. Standing on the precipice of revelation or ruin, Morgan knew only one thing was certain. More secrets lay hidden beneath Seward's quiet facade, waiting to be unearthed. Detective Morgan's mind was a whirlwind as he replayed the anonymous call about new evidence. It seemed like a lifeline, one that could unravel the mystery of how Casey Kindt slipped through so many legal nets. But before he could chase this lead, the story of Jamie's last day needed to be told. The morning of February 8th began for Jamie Hagen with an unsettling sense of dread. As she brewed coffee in her modest kitchen, every sound seemed amplified. The drip of the faucet, the hum of the refrigerator, and then a soft thud at the door. She hesitated before opening it to find a small, unmarked package on her doorstep. Her heart raced as she carried it inside, placing it on the table with trembling hands. Inside was a letter from Kindt, each word laced with threats and deranged proclamations of love and control. "You'll always be mine," it read, echoing his obsession. The package confirmed her worst fears. Kindt wasn't finished tormenting her. The letter was enough to push Jamie into action. She reached for her phone but hesitated. Would another call to the authorities do any good? Her previous attempts had only led to temporary resolutions at best. Still, this time felt different, more urgent and dangerous. With mounting tension, Jamie decided to visit a friend for advice and support. Yet, something kept her rooted in her home. An ominous feeling that leaving might provoke an unpredictable response from Kindt. Meanwhile, in downtown Seward, Casey Kindt roamed Main Street with an unsettling air of calm. He moved through the town as if he owned it, despite the restraining orders against him. His presence was a stark contrast to the quiet fear he had instilled in Jamie's home. A friend spotted him and decided to intervene. "Casey," they called out sharply, "what are you doing? You know you're not supposed to be here." Kindt smirked, his eyes cold and confident. "The law's never been able to hold me," he replied with a chilling certainty that sent shivers down their spine. This confrontation on Main Street was more than just a public spectacle. It was a harbinger of what was to come. The friend's attempt to reason with Kindt only fueled his sense of invincibility, a dangerous mindset on the brink of turning lethal. As evening fell over Seward, Jamie remained vigilant at home, surrounded by an atmosphere thick with tension and anticipation. Her instincts screamed that something terrible was about to happen, a feeling validated by Kindt's earlier presence in town. The town's lights dimmed under the darkening sky as February 8th edged closer to its tragic climax. Jamie's anxiety peaked as shadows stretched across her living room floor. Each passing minute seemed an eternity. Then came the final hour, a silent countdown within Jamie's heart matched by Kindt's steady steps towards her home. The air was electric, with unrealized threats and unspoken fears. Detective Morgan drove through Seward's quiet streets, guided by an unsettling intuition that something crucial was about to unfold, something linked directly to Kindt's ominous last words on Main Street. As he neared Jamie's neighborhood, the radio crackled with noise, a dispatcher calling all units to North 2nd Street. Morgan's heart sank as adrenaline surged through his veins once more, a familiar yet unwelcome rush. He floored the accelerator towards what he feared was another chapter in Seward's unfolding tragedy. In those final moments before reaching Jamie's home, everything hung in fragile balance, justice teetering on the edge of chaos. As Morgan raced onward into uncertainty, one question loomed larger than all others. Would he arrive too late to prevent another heartbreak? Or would this night finally reveal what lay beneath Seward's shadowy facade? In the distance, sirens wailed their mournful song, a prelude to yet another dark revelation. The silence of Seward's night was shattered by the wail of sirens, a desperate chorus that matched the turmoil within Detective Morgan's heart. Racing towards North 2nd Street, he couldn't shake the ominous gravity of Kindt's final words on Main Street. The chilling thought of what awaited at Jamie Hagen's home propelled him forward, each second stretching into an eternity. Inside the house, a child crouched in a corner, trembling as they recounted the events to a 911 operator. Their voice wavered with fear and an overwhelming sense of guilt. In the dimly lit room, Kindt's intrusion replayed in their mind, a door crashing open, angry shouts, and then a deafening series of gunshots. Every sound echoed through their memory like a relentless nightmare. Officers arrived swiftly, their presence both reassuring and sobering. As they took in the scene, one officer noticed peculiar markings on Kindt's hand, now lifeless at the doorway. The symbols were crude and obscure, hinting at possible involvement in occult practices. This discovery suggested a deeper psychological facet to Kindt's obsession, a symbolic element that might have driven his relentless pursuit. With this revelation, new questions arose. What power did these symbols hold over Kindt? Were they merely delusions or part of something more sinister? The officers exchanged glances, understanding that this was yet another layer to peel back in their search for answers. At the Seward Police Department, Detective Morgan faced an onslaught of media questions and public anger. The community demanded explanations for how such a tragedy could occur, despite numerous warnings. Under pressure, Morgan focused on piecing together witness accounts and crime scene evidence. Forensics reported finding a phone belonging to Kindt among the scattered debris of Jamie's home. On it were recorded conversations, dark threats, and manipulative promises, documenting his psychological grip on Jamie. These recordings painted a haunting picture of systemic failures that allowed Kindt to terrorize her continually. As Morgan listened to the calls, each word dripped with malice, reinforcing his determination to uncover every misstep that led here. He could visualize Jamie's struggle against an invisible web of legal loopholes, her cries for help stifled by bureaucratic indifference. The evidence mounted like a silent accusation against those who failed to protect Jamie. Yet it was not enough to satisfy the growing outrage in Seward. The community wanted justice, but more than that, they needed assurance that such neglect would never happen again. Morgan knew he was running out of time. If they didn't act quickly, crucial details might slip away amid the chaos of grief and blame. But as he prepared to delve deeper into Kindt's past, his phone buzzed with an unexpected message. It was from an anonymous source, the same shaky voice from before, claiming knowledge of hidden documents that could expose further discrepancies in how Kindt had been handled by law enforcement. The message was brief but clear. Meet tonight at midnight behind the old grain silo on the edge of town. A chill ran down Morgan's spine as he considered the risks involved in following such a lead. Yet every instinct urged him forward. This could be the key to unraveling how deeply Kindt's manipulations ran. As midnight approached, Morgan steeled himself for what lay ahead, a clandestine meeting that promised either revelation or ruin. In the shadows cast by Seward's traditional facades, secrets simmered just below the surface, a reminder that even here, beneath familiar exteriors, darkness could thrive undetected. As Detective Morgan drove through the hushed streets of Seward, the weight of Kindt's impending confession lingered heavily in his thoughts. The anonymous message had promised a critical revelation, yet caution warned him of the dangers in pursuing such leads. Still, with the town's peace shattered, he had little choice but to follow every thread. The meeting at the grain silo under the shadowed sky left Morgan with more questions than answers. The papers handed over by his mysterious informant detailed a disturbing pattern of ignored warnings. Emails from local advocates, pleading for heightened protective measures against Kindt, were systematically overlooked by those in power. It was a damning confirmation of procedural neglect. This discovery propelled Morgan to Seward City Hall, where city officials, faced with public outrage, attempted to downplay responsibility. In a tense encounter, they insisted all procedures had been followed according to protocol, despite the prosecutor's documented warnings about Kindt's threat level. Morgan pressed them, brandishing the emails as evidence of their oversight. The room's atmosphere grew charged as officials shifted uncomfortably under the gaze of the media and citizens demanding accountability. The evidence was undeniable. Systemic failures had allowed Kindt's freedom despite clear danger. The mounting pressure instigated an internal review, sparking hopes for systemic reform that might prevent future tragedies. Yet Morgan knew this was only part of the battle. Understanding Kindt's twisted motives required more than bureaucratic acknowledgement. Days later, in a sterile hospital room in Omaha, Morgan and his team stood by Casey Kindt's bedside as he regained consciousness. Seeking justice for Jamie Hagen meant unraveling Kindt's mind, but they were met with defiant silence. His refusal to speak left an unsettling void where answers should have been. Determined not to leave empty-handed, Morgan turned to Kindt's personal effects, including a journal seized earlier. Each page revealed an intricate web of obsession, a chilling mirror to the threatening letters he'd sent Jamie. The journal depicted a methodical vendetta driven by delusions of love and control, confirming the depth of his misguided fixation. This insight prompted Morgan to consult psychological experts who could profile Kindt's mental state. Such analysis offered a glimmer of closure for Jamie's loved ones and served as a catalyst for understanding how one man's obsession could erupt into violence so devastatingly. As experts dissected Kindt's psyche, they uncovered disturbing patterns resembling those found in notorious cases of domestic fixation, an unsettling parallel that underscored systemic failures in recognizing warning signs. Morgan realized that while justice was delayed for Jamie Hagen, her story might yet save others from similar fates. As he left the hospital room behind, he felt a bittersweet sense that their efforts would bring some semblance of peace, not just for Jamie, but for all who live under the shadow of unchecked obsession. In Seward, life began its slow return to normalcy under the watchful eyes of a community forever altered by tragedy. Yet within this healing process lay an unresolved tension, a question that haunted both Morgan and the townspeople. How many more would suffer before real change took hold? As Morgan walked away from this chapter of his career, he knew one thing remained true. beneath Seward's quiet surface still lurked secrets waiting to be uncovered, a reminder that vigilance must persist if justice is ever truly to be served.